Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. Chapter 36, in which Phileas Fogg is again at a premium in the market. It is time to tell here what a change of opinion was produced in the United Kingdom when they learned of the arrest of the true robber of the bank, certain James Strand, which took place in Edinburgh on the 17th of December. 3 days before, Phileas Fogg was a criminal whom the police were pursuing to the utmost, and now he was the most honest gentleman, accomplishing mathematically his eccentric tour round the world. What an effect! What an excitement in the papers! All the better or against, and who had already forgotten this affair, revived as if by magic. All the transactions became of value. All the engagements were renewed. It must be said that betting was resumed with new energy. The name Phileas Fogg was again at a premium on the market. 5 colleagues of this gentleman at the Reform Club passed these 3 days with some uneasiness. Would this Phileas Fogg, whom they had forgotten, reappear before their eyes? Where was he at this moment? On the 17th of December, that day that James Strand was arrested, it was 76 days since Phileas Fogg started, and no news from him was be dead. Had he given up on the effort, or was continuing course as agreed upon? And would he appear on Saturday, the 21st of December, at a quarter before 9 in the evening, the very impersonation of exactness, or on the threshold of the saloon of the Reform Club? We must give up the effort to depict the anxiety in which for 3 days of all London society lived. They sent dispatches to America, to Asia, to get news of Phileas Fogg. They sent morning, evening, to watch the house in Savile Row. Nothing there. The police themselves did not know what had become of the detective Fix, and who did not so unfortunately throw himself on a false scent. And this had not prevent bets from being entered anew on a larger scale. Phileas Fogg, like a racehorse, was coming to its last turn. He was quoted no longer at 100, but 20, 10, 5, and the old paralytic Lord Amilbaro even bet his favour. So on that Saturday evening there was a crowd in Pall Mall in the neighbouring streets. It might be supposed that there was an immense crowd of brokers immediately established around the Reform Club. Circulations was impeded. They disputed and cried the prices of Phileas Fogg like they did of those English consols. The policemen had much difficulty in keeping the crowd back, and in the proportion as an hour approached at which Phileas Fogg ought to arrive, and the excitement took in incredible proportions this evening. The 5 colleagues of this gentleman were assembled in the grand saloon of the Reform Club. 2 bankers, John Sullivan and Samuel Fullerton, the engineers, Andrew Stewart and Gothier Ralph, and the director of the Bank of England, and the brewer, Thomas Flanagan, all waited with anxiety. At the moment that passed, the clock in the grand saloon indicated 25 minutes past 8. Andrew Stewart rising. Gentlemen, in 20 minutes the time agreed upon between Mr. Phileas Fogg and ourselves will have expired. At what hour did the last train arrive from Liverpool? Asked Thomas Flanagan. 23 minutes after 7, replied Gothier. The next train does not arrive until 10 minutes after 12, midnight. Well, gentlemen, continued Andrew Stewart, if Phileas Fogg is arrived at the train in 23 minutes after 7, he would already be here. Then consider we have won the bet. Let us wait before deciding, replied Samuel Fullerton. You know that our colleague is an oddity of the first order. His exactness in everything is well known. He never arrives too late or too soon, and he will appear here at the very last minute, or so I shall be very much surprised. And I, replied Andrew Stewart, who was, as always, very nervous, would not believe it was he if I saw him. In fact, replied Thomas Flanagan, Phileas Fogg's project was a senseless one. However exact he may be, he could not prevent the occurrence of inevitable delays, and a delay of but 2 or 3 days would be sufficient to compromise the tour. You will notice, besides, added John Sullivan, that we have received no news from our colleague, yet telegraph lines were not wanting upon his route. Gentlemen, he is lost, replied Andrew Stewart. He has lost 100 times. You know, besides that, the China, the only steamer from New York that could take from Liverpool to be any use of him, arrived yesterday. And now, here's the list of passengers, published by the Shipping Gazette. And now, the name of Phileas Fogg is not among them. Admitting the most favourable chances, our colleague has scarcely reached America. I calculate 20 days, at least, at the time he will be behind. And the old Lord Amilbaro will be minus £5,000. It is evident, replied Gothier Ralph, and tomorrow we will only present to Baring Brothers Mr. Fogg's cheque. At this moment, the clock in the saloon struck 40 minutes after 8. 5 minutes yet, said Andrew Stewart. The five colleagues looked at each other. It may be believed that their hearts beat a little more rapidly. Even for the good players, it was a great risk. If they did not betray themselves, as for Samuel Fullerton's suggestion, they seated themselves at the card table. I would not give my part for £4,000 in the bet, said Andrew Stewart, seating himself, and even if I was offered £3,999. And at this moment the two hands noted 42 minutes after 8, and the players took up their cards, and their eyes were constantly fixed upon the clock. It may be asserted that notwithstanding security, the minutes have never seemed so long to them. 43 minutes after 8, replied Thomas Flanagan, cutting the cards which Gothier presented them. And there were at a moment's silence. The immense saloon of the club was quiet. Outside they heard the hubbub of crowds, and above which heard loud cries. The pendulum of the clock was beating the seconds with mathematical regularity. Every player would count them as he struck his ear. 44 minutes after 8, replied Sir John Sullivan, in a voice which was heard in voluntary emotion. One more minute and the bet would be won. Andrew Stewart and his colleagues played no longer. They had abandoned their cards. They were counting the seconds. At the 40th second, nothing, and at the 50th, nothing. At the 55th, there was a roaring that sounded like thunder outside. Shouts, hurrahs, and even curses kept up in one of the rungs, and the players rose. At the 57th second, the door of the saloon opened, and the pendulum had not beat the 60th second when Phileas Fogg appeared, followed by an excited crowd who had forced an entrance in the club, and his calm voice said, "Gentlemen, here I am."